We're in Titus chapter 1, verse 10. We'll start by reading it in the Greek, and then we'll work through reading it in the NASB, and then work through some different questions that we see coming from this text. So, Titus chapter 1, verse 10. Eisen gar paloi kai anupataktoi malaya lagoi kai phrenapatai malista hoi ek tes peritomes. So reading through that in the New American Standard, we see, "For there are many rebellious men, empty talkers, and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision party." So the first thing to notice is the conjunction here, gar, and this could either be logical explanatory, giving is tagged in the logos system there, logical explanatory, explaining what's above, or even giving the reason behind it. So reading in context, we see the elder has to be able to hold fast the faithful word which is in accordance with the teaching, so that he may be able both to exhort in sound doctrine and to refute those who contradict it. For, or gar, there's the reason behind, or an explanation behind, why must he be holding to the scriptures so clearly? Why must he be able to specifically refute those who contradict it? Well, in context here, on Crete, here we read that the reason is, for there are, eisen, this is third person, and it's plural. So, interesting decision point here. Either we have the statement something to the effect of, there is, so, and then what follows is, there is many, with paloi being the complement. So in this case, it'd be a diagram something like nothing in the subject slot, eisen as the verb, and then paloi. So there are many, ... and then a further complement to that many, those many who are what follows. Another way to take this would be to say there are many, or many are, in which case you would actually have paloi. So paloi is that word for many. Many is the subject, and then eisen as the verb. And then what follows would be the fact that we have three other things that are in the nominative case. So what's functioning in that predicate slot would be those other words. So many are blank and blank and blank. Now, and that's where this gets into a text critical question of, is there indeed a kai here? The square brackets indicate that that's a text critical question that is, there's some textual uncertainty whether or not that kai was inserted later or not. And whether or not that kai is there determines whether these things are in connection to one another in parallel or separated. So that's a little bit of what's going into that decision to say many are blank, specifically in this case, as the NASB translated to many are rebellious persons, this anuptotaktoi, many are rebellious, or there are many who are rebellious. So that would be just a glimpse into that text critical question there. Going through the rest of these words here, we have already seen the anuptaktoi, which we'll do a quick logos search to see those that are disobedient or rebellious, or those that are not subject to or independent. So that the negative sense is taken on in verse 2 very clearly. So, or not verse 2, sense 2 in DBL. So we'd want to side with that, with the negative connotations here. So many are rebellious. Again, commas are not original, so you have to think through, okay, where is the comma break here? And these next two being in the same case, both nominative case, nominative plural, these could be in apposition to what's above. the anuptaktoi. So that could be empty talkers and deceivers, just kind of having the many rebellious men, that is, they are empty talkers and deceivers. That would be to take it in that position. Or you could take all of these as one unit and have all three of those being in parallel. There are many rebellious men, empty talkers, and deceivers. The lack of the comma after empty talkers here in NASB makes me think NASB took this as apposition, but that wouldn't necessarily be a definitive case. So that is kind of the basis here for why elders must be able to refute error, is that there are many who are rebellious, they're empty talkers, and they're actually deceivers, those that take the truth and twist it. Just to look at that word in the DBL, quite simply, it is a deceiver. There's no additional phrase given because this is really the only place that this shows up in Titus 1:10. The only place this word occurs in the New Testament. And then this malista, interesting word to do a study on if you dig into it. Especially only occurs a handful of significant times, but especially is the idea here, especially those of, and this hoi means what follows is kind of a functioning as a nominative concept, because this is a nominative article, a plural nominative. So especially the ones or those or thus, from, out of, ek, from is a preposition, from, out of, tes, peritomes. And peritomes is the word for circumcision. And interestingly, you look at DBL here, and it's very helpful that in the first entry they just have the circumcision, or circumcision in general, and what the concept is. But then there's a second entry that is a whole phrase that is, they're basically categorized and saying when this phrase occurs together, it is to be translated those of the circumcision, or the Jews who were believers, is the idea. So there's various places in which that occurs in a more positive sense. Titus 1:10 is a very negative connotation here with those of the circumcision, and it could perhaps even be a little bit you could end up misreading some theology into the text if you took this lexical entry and said, oh, this entry says that Jews were believers, therefore this must mean believers. No, this would rather be in the context of those that are circumcised, who are professing faith in Christ, but not necessarily regenerate, as is seen by the previous description here in the first part of the verse that talks about them being rebellious, empty talkers, and deceivers. And further, as we go into the other verses, we kind of see some pretty anti-gospel tendencies among these rebellious, empty talkers and deceivers. But this is particularly happening coming from those who are, especially those of the circumcision, or those from that group that is those that have been circumcised. And as we're going to see, the connection between the law and endless genealogies and myths, there's definitely a strong connection of those that are pushing for a return back to the Old Testament system, and a belief that the Mosaic covenant is a means of salvation even after the inauguration of the new covenant. So there is Titus 1:10 in a nutshell as we work through those different words and how they're functioning in the sentence.